Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Strokes album, Comedown Machine. Woo! 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 The Strokes are a New York indie rock and pop rock band whose full-length debut album is a perfect or a near-perfect album for very many people. The band's debut LP is loaded with extremely concise, catchy, and sharp as hell rock tunes that stick into the back of your head with magic. Earworm guitar leads, great beats, and of course Julian Casablancas' trademark croon. The band's sophomore full-length LP further solidified their place as a worthwhile act in modern rock, but in my opinion things kind of went south around the time of their third full-length LP. And unfortunately for others, things went even further south when the band put out the album Angles just a couple years ago, which is kind of a polarizing LP for a few different reasons. Contextually, because when the band reconvened, kind of came back from their hiatus to start putting out music together again, Julian Casablancas said in an interview with Brian on NBC News that pretty much the band got back together because of the money. But the LP is also polarizing because on Angles, the Strokes started experimenting with their sound in a really big way. They started using more synthesizers, incorporating elements of new wave music, which were really huge players when Julian Casablancas came out with a solo full length. And just overall, they were distancing themselves from that original sound that people kind of grew up loving from the Strokes. I personally really liked the diversity that Angles brought to the table, and I was also hoping that that would be a really likable factor on this new LP as well, especially considering how much of a surprise the track One Way Trigger was when it originally came out. Not a perfectly executed song, but the acoustic guitar and the really bouncy synthesizers, as well as Julian Casablancas' freaking falsetto vocals on that track. A lot of people were comparing it to Aha's Take On Me, which I don't really see at all. I mean, I think the fact that they have an explosive chorus that has a falsetto on it, that's really the only thing that, you know, feels similar to me between those two tracks. However, that's not to say that the Strokes don't have really clear influences on this new LP on other tracks. They most certainly do. For one, new wave is still a pretty big influence on many songs on Comedown Machine. The song Welcome to Japan has a really huge disco backbeat on the track. The opening song on this LP, Tap Out, with the guitar leads, the guitars on this track are a dead ringer for at least a couple different Michael Jackson songs. And on the song 50/50, the Strokes have never sounded so punk. If Angles was a sign of the Strokes kind of letting go of their inhibitions, which were penning them into their original style, then Comedown Machine is a sign of them dropping them almost completely. I guess the Strokes kind of went into this LP with a problem, and that problem is that they want a different sound. They want a different style. They just want to do something different in general. But for me, the issue as a listener is that I don't really feel like they're all that picky with their solutions. On paper, is the idea of incorporating a falsetto vocal on many of these tracks a bad thing? No. However, is Julian Casablancas' falsetto all that well sung most of the time? No, it's not. Julian's falsetto is very, very off on a lot of these tracks to the point where it sounds kind of ridiculous, especially on the closing track where the band was definitely sort of going for this vintage sentimental jazz style ballad that is very, very Little Joy-like. It's like I'm listening to the recreation of some kind of song that I would hear playing through some old tube radio, something like that. But in my opinion, the song kind of gets lost in its own nostalgia. It hears what it wants to copy, but it's not listening to itself, because if it was, it would hear how much of a mockery it is. And the other track that the Strokes dropped before the release of this LP, All the Time, which in my opinion is really the only song on this album that sounds like a traditional Strokes song, it feels completely flat, lifeless. It's really the only Strokes song that I've ever heard that I would label as being almost completely soulless. There are some tracks on here that I do think are just generally enjoyable though. They may take on a little bit of influence somewhere else, but at their core, they feel like just nice, catchy Strokes songs. Tracks like Tap Out Happy Ending, Partners in Crime, Slow Animals as well. These tracks are proof that the Strokes are still writing competent, catchy pop rock songs that, in a way, I can kind of in the back of my head hear them play these tracks in their older, more traditional style. And what's even worse than these very surface level changes is that a lot of the alterations the Strokes make to their songs, it's not like they come off as versatile enough to actually execute well what they're going for. They haven't refined a lot of these songs enough to the point where they don't sound silly. Like on the track Slow Animals, where Julian's background and foreground vocals intertwine with one another in a really just lazy, bad way. Or all of the weird talking sort of "Welcome to Japan" sort of narrating vocals on the track Welcome to Japan. It turns the song into a bigger cornball than it already is. And the title track on here could have used a bit of refinement as well. It would have been a beautiful, beautiful ballad had the band cut it down from its minute length and really just made it a bit punchier. And in terms of punch, I mean, Julian isn't really there either emotionally, though his falsetto vocals are there. It's not like he comes off as I guess, sort of bold as he usually does. On this LP, in comparison with previous Strokes releases, he's much more shy, understated, which is an angle that works for a lot of artists on a lot of albums, but I don't find it to be particularly effective on this one. You know, overall, I think the songwriting on this LP is okay. I mean, it's what you would expect from the Strokes. The songs are decent, and the production overall is really good too. Aside from some ill-placed vocal effects and some vocals that feel drowned out from time to time, the guitars sound great, the drums are punchy and clear, the synthesizer sounds stellar. I love, what is that organ on the title track on this LP too, with the arpeggios. The instrumentation sounds great, and maybe that's really the only true saving grace that Comedown Machine has going for it. But the thing is, the band ends up stubbing their toe on all these changes they want to make. And it's not that the band wants to change in general that makes Comedown Machine a kind of weak album. It's that it doesn't really feel like they care if any of these changes sound good. Honestly, there are moments when I listen to this album, especially with the vocals, that I feel like the Strokes are just kind of screwing around a little bit. I'm kind of feeling a strong 4 to a light 5 on this LP. If you've given it a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And yeah, that's it. The Strokes, Comedown Machine, forever.